What's up, everybody? This is Steph Simon.
This is Simon Vollmer, Simon Vollmer actually.
And we are doing the podcast thing for the first time. Um, we thought with our personalities and both being professional boxers that we could have kind of a fun little thing for y'all. So today is just going to be simple introduction. We're going to keep these things 15 minutes. We're not going to make this an hour, 2 hour long thing. So, So Simon,
Yes.
tell me about yourself. Where are you from? Where do you live? Let's start off from the beginning.
So I'm from Germany, from a city called Kaiserslautern. It's a small city, it's not really much boxing going on, and that's why I'm here in LA. And yeah, that's how we met basically. I was in Germany my whole life, competing, amateur stuff. We'll talk about it later. And then kind of halfway moved or traveled a lot to the US. And now we train at the same gym. And that's basically how I'm here.
Got you. So I met him, like you said, through our boxing gym in LA. I'm from technically Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up in Washington State, though. So Washington State up north, not DC. They get confused sometimes. So um, I didn't start boxing till I was about 19 years old. Kind of started boxing in college, actually. So we'll get into that as well. But I wanted to go into a little bit about when you started boxing.
Right.
So how old were you and how that all happened?
Right now I'm 22. I'm 22 right now. I started boxing when I was probably like 9. I was just, I was kind of the kid who started every sport, but nothing really, I didn't like the team sports. I played football and like soccer. I think you guys call
That's
it,
what they
right?
call it here. Yeah.
So soccer, whatever. You kick the ball in the net.
Right.
So I didn't like that, and I liked fighting, but I tried all the fake shit, like not to throw shade on anybody, but there was a lot of like karate courses for kids, and it wasn't the real deal. It was just like making a lot of sounds, a lot of flips and shit. And so then after school there was like a course, like a boxing introduction, like a tryout.
Right.
So I tried it out, and I kind of whooped the older guys, and I was like, man, this is really nice. So I started going on the boxing club, and then I really started competing a little bit too early. I got my ass whooped like the first 2 3 amateur fights, and I still loved it and kept training hard, and that's how I ended up here. And yeah, that's my story. How about you?
We'll get more into the weeds of the story, but for me, like I said, I started boxing at 19. I grew up kind of like you, doing a lot of sports, wrestling, taekwondo, the karate type stuff, which is it's got its place and purpose, but it's a little different than boxing. We'll say that. Track and field, and then when I got to college, I wanted to pursue wrestling, but my college didn't have it. I went to a military college. They didn't really have women's wrestling, so we all had to do boxing though. So all the freshmen had to do boxing at the Naval Academy, which is a military college. So that's kind of how I discovered it, kind of by accident. Yeah, and so that's how it all started. So now I'll go back to you. So tell me about your amateur career, how many fights you had, national team type stuff.
So I would say it's not crazy. Like I would say I have about like 100 amateur fights, something like that.
Not crazy.
And no, but there are people, like
300.
250 fucking, competed every week. In Germany, there wasn't like too much competition, and we also didn't have. I don't know, how is it in the US? Do you guys have nationals more often in the year or just once a year?
We have two different big national tournaments, but there's one a year that actually counts for like the Olympics and stuff.
Okay,
the other
so
one is different.
we just have one national a year, so and just less tournaments. So 100 is in Germany, it's a lot, but overseas it's not like too crazy. There are a lot of Russians that have like 300. So I have like 100 amateur fights. I'm national champion like 4 times. Yes, 4 times. And yeah, it's I was in the national team. I wanted kind of to go to the Olympics like when I was younger. That was a dream of mine. But I made a decision. And I think it was smart. I I turned pro earlier because the training in Germany, to be honest, isn't good at all. So like the system and everything, and it's really not designed for you to be a great fighter. Like to be technical and everything. It's just about getting points in the amateurs.
Right.
I was like, man, I want to do more. I want to turn pro. So I don't want to wait 4 years or whatever, because I was still very young at that time. So Paris this year would be my Olympics. I don't want to wait that long and not make progress in training. I felt like I was making not too much progress. My trainers didn't really care too much. I didn't really know too much. So I just traveled. I went to the UK, I went to the US, different cities, different trainers, tried it out, sparred a lot of pros, even when I was still amateur. And that's when I was like, man, I got to come here. So I kind of just was like, man, fuck the Olympics. I'm going to go pro earlier because I want to be the best version of myself and not just wait for one tournament.
That makes sense. Yes. That makes sense. Yeah, for me, I only had 30-something amateur fights, but similar situation in the sense that most women don't get a crazy amount of fights, especially my age. I'm 30. The women that are coming up now, they get like way more fights because it's just more popular, women's boxing. But my amateur career, I started off in the college leagues. So collegiate boxing is very low level. Like, I'm not saying it's terrible, but it's not that competitive. I mean, most of the fighters there have less than 10 fights. Pretty much all of them do. And then around 2019, I actually went to like my first USA Nationals. And by the time I reached to like 2023, 2024, I had won a handful of national championships and I won the Olympic trials. A lot of politics with that. I've talked about it in many other podcasts before. We'll get into that other episodes.
For sure.
Definitely want to dive into that, but I decided to turn pro after the trials. I didn't make the Olympic team, which is crazy, but so I turned pro September 27th. That's literally a few weeks ago, actually. So, but the amateurs were interesting. I think, I mean, the U.S., the amateurs, there's a lot of tournaments. It's different. There's a lot more opportunities than in Germany. So, I mean, for the guys at least, a lot of them will have 200, 300 fights, kind of like Eastern Europeans. So, but yeah, that's kind of a little bit synopsis of the amateurs. I did a lot of my boxing with the Marine Corps boxing team as well. So that was also pretty fun. We'll talk about that later too. But we'll get back to you now. Let's talk about the transition into the pros. And you talk about coming out here to LA. When was the first time you came to LA? And when was the first actual fight that you had that was a pro fight?
So it's very interesting when you go just from training amateurs and then training with pros. It's very interesting because you go out there, you are like a good amateur, top amateur, and you spar a pro, a seasoned pro, and right away you think like, oh, this is not that hard. The pace is so low, or you at least think in the first round.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of read you, and then they, just starting. And by round 5, 6, they already know all of your weapons because you just went in there trying to get points, and they can break you down like systematically. So this is, first of all, the biggest difference. And a side note is, everybody like thinks about turning pro quick. I would actually say spar with pros like 6 months to a year with real good pros, and then okay, now I'm ready. Now I know the pace. 100%. Now I'm ready to turn pro. Don't turn pro too early and just jump into a pro fight. Because even some of these journeymen, they don't fight until the 3rd round, and you think you got them, you already gassed out, and then they're gonna get you. So they're smart. So that's just a side note. But for me, it was not too big of a transition. I just had to learn to settle down a little bit, the pace, to kind of learn a lot of defensive movements as well, because the small gloves, no headgear. I was used to fighting with no headgear, but small gloves, different pace, different power. So
100%.
Just that in and of itself, and then I had my first, few fights in Germany. Then here this year.
What year was your first fight?
2023. So January, I think. So last year, beginning of last year, I made my pro debut, and now I'm 6-0. My fight in the US was in May. Appreciate it. in Riverside, awesome. California. And so I go back and forth. Sometimes I fight in Europe and sometimes in the US. Obviously, the goal is to fight way more in the US than in Europe, to establish
build the name here. Establish yourself.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Exactly. And how was it for you, the transition? Because you already, I know you trained with a lot of pros, you sparred with a lot of pros, and then you had your pro fight. Was it basically what you expected, or was it kind of like very different from the amateurs?
Yeah, so for me, the transition into the pros, um, you're right. I mean, the pace and the style of boxing is totally different.
Yeah.
I would compare the amateurs to a game of tag. Points, points, points. You're in, you're out. 1-1-2, slip, 2, roll, like in and out, in and out. And it's you're not really focused on sitting on your punches.
Mm-hmm.
So as a matter of fact, a lot of times there's fights that actually go like in a split decision, for example, towards a guy that's landing little pity patter shots.
Absolutely.
When the other guy is actually probably landing cleaner, harder
100%.
shots. So I think that that's probably the biggest transition, was going from a game of tag to a game of chess. And like you said, round 3, well, it makes sense why you say after 3 rounds people get tired, like, oh crap, because an amateur fights 3 rounds. So
yeah.
Pro fight goes up to 12. You have to pace yourself. You have to be smart. And the other big difference is body shots. Mm-hmm. So in the amateurs, I noticed people will throw 1s and 2s to the body a lot, but they're not really throwing like hard body shots, right. Which if you get hit with a hard body shot, it changes the whole fight. So that's probably the biggest transition, is not playing tag anymore, and then also incorporating more body shots. And I also like what you said about the defense, because that's what I'm working on the most right now, is catching and slipping and rolling. So
efficiency. It's very much about efficiency, because in the amateurs, your defense are basically your legs. So you just move around a lot and try, in that scenario, you move around, boom, touch them, move around.
Get out of the way.
So you could win a fight like that easy, but in the pros, when the goal is to fight 12 rounds, in a title fight, you have to be as efficient as possible. Like, don't waste too much movement, but also don't stay there and let somebody just break you down. So, like you said, it's a game of chess. It's very, very calculated, and just the strategy has to be on point. You got to be very, very efficient, and efficiency is key. And you have to train that. You can't just go in and like, okay, I was a great amateur. Now I'm just doing a slower pace. No. You have to train the efficiency. You have to train the movements, because that's still muscle memory. That jumping around and that touching. Like, you got to learn to
your
block.
Your body's used to it. Yeah.
Exactly. To catch and shoot. Like in the amateurs, you rarely learn how to catch and shoot and block.
No, I didn't learn that. Yeah. No. At the highest levels with Team USA, we did not. It was bag drills. A bunch of punches, get out of the way, back in, but about 3 to 5 punches every 3 to 5 seconds. Yeah. There was no actual technique involved, so you're 100% right in that.
And to be honest, like, look, I love amateur boxing. I love it. And I think you always have an advantage if you've been a good amateur. But real boxing is pro boxing, because if you have 2 people who fight, who box, right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about MMA, if you say, real fighting, or street fight or whatever. But if you have 2 people who box and you want to find out who's better, they need more rounds to figure that out. There are some people that can really punch, but they need 2 rounds to get warmed up. So if that dude is, after the 3rd round in the amateur fight, not even tired, and the last 30 seconds clipped you, but you just outpointed him and you are that tired,
who knows?
In the 5th round, you would have gotten knocked out, but you just won the fight fairly easy. But you didn't win. You win the boxing amateur match, but you didn't win the fight. So that, in my opinion, I think real boxing is pro boxing, because you actually find out who the better boxer is.
I agree with that. I agree with that. That's why they call it the championship rounds.
Right.
And a lot of times, some of the greats have lost the first couple rounds in fights. And they're basically downloading the data.
Yeah, Lomachenko, Crawford,
I mean, even Canelo too. Kind of takes a while to warm up.
Get Canelo in the Olympics.
He probably lose every fight.
Yeah, but he's the best fighter there.
Yeah, 100%. So, and I do want to talk about, this kind of bleeds into the next topic of styles. Like, what's your style? What makes you Simon in the ring?
Yeah, I think I'm very creative. And I'm very free, I move very free, very creative. I don't like to restrict myself with, standing and just waiting to punch. I try to create opportunities, to feint a lot, to just use my rhythm and my movement. I feel like that's my natural gift. And then add on to that, and also I feel like I'm a counter puncher, but I don't just sit there and wait. I like to create opportunities. So I would say I'm like an aggressive counter puncher who, tall southpaw, so I use my jab a lot. And I always like, if I think I'm very good defensively, but I just want, like, when people watch me spar or when people watch me fight, I want them to enjoy it. To like, it's like art. It's not just I put my hands up and I throw. It should be like art, like I'm drawing a picture or I'm drawing something,
100%.
So I want it to be like art. I want it to look beautiful. Even though it's violent, I want it to look beautiful. That's kind of what I want to have as a style. And I feel like until now it worked pretty good.
No, I love that. And, I think that's a
Lost
fighting
art, yeah.
style and art. If you look at all the greats, Sugar Ray Leonard and Muhammad Ali and Roberto Duran, they painted the picture on the canvas. It was literal artwork, the way they moved. But that's the thing, they could crack. They were fluid, they could crack and they could hit hard, but they also moved so beautifully in the ring. And they had good defense, and they were captivating. And we've kind of lost that a lot in boxing. Everybody's trying to bang and go for the knockout because everyone's being told that knockouts sell, knockouts sell. Yes, knockouts are really entertaining, but so is beautiful boxing. But that's also entertaining. Also entertaining. I think that people need to stress that more. Footwork. So, like you said, you're a lefty, you're tall, you're long, and you have good defense and you move. I feel like, man, you have a bright future ahead of you.
Appreciate it. And you as well.
Well, for me, my style.
How would you describe like your style? Because I feel like you fight very smart, and you kind of, like, I feel like you are all rounder. For example, you can move a lot. I see you, like, when you shadow box, moving a lot, but you can also aggressively switch your pace and then attack. And also a follow-up question: do you think, because you started boxing later, but I think that your kind of athletic background with the wrestling helped you so much, because you are extremely, like, explosive, and your movements are very coordinated and very explosive, so did that help you as well?
For sure, it did. And I think if I had started boxing at 19 with no background in any sport, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today as a pro boxer, because I probably would not have made it. You're correct, though. I think the background in other sports, I mean, wrestling is such a physical sport, so much mental toughness. We've worked out together, like the pull-ups, like everything. You mentally and physically have to be very strong to be a wrestler. So I use a lot of those aspects of wrestling and kind of integrated it into boxing. And then I was a thrower, a Division I track and field thrower. So I threw discus, shot put, javelin, and with those events comes a lot of lifting. So I used to, when I was a lot bigger, Stephanie, like close to 170 pounds, I was like benching 220 and squatting over 300. Yeah, squatting over 300 pounds. So that's where a lot of that strength comes from, is from my background in track and field. So everything has a reason, everything has a purpose. Being able to move a lot in the ring, did cross country as well. So a lot of running. I love to run. So I've kind of taken all those little aspects of these other sports and combined it together. But I agree. I think
you have a very interesting, like, combination of, you are very strong, also like very strong frame, the way you fight, you're very explosive and strong, but you are not like, you don't fight like stocky and
like an MMA fighter
at all. Like, you are very flexible and very creative and fluent, but still strong and explosive. And I think that's extremely important as a world-class athlete. You have to have all the aspects, and I feel like, even like, for example, dance, you learn everything very fast. And so that's a huge, like, bonus. You can pick up movements. You can, like, a coach shows you something and you just adapt it. That's very important, because a lot of people who are very strong, and have like a background in being strong, they move kind of stocky, but that's, with you, that's not at all, so that's very, very good.
I appreciate that. And the one thing about Simon, and we'll kind of end it here because we don't want to give too much to you guys, but the thing about Simon that I love is that he's a student. And that's also a very lost art as well, because I think a lot of people in a newer generation, they watch some videos, YouTube videos, they take a couple classes in boxing, and then they think that they don't need to learn anything and that they're good and they're strong. Simon's always asking questions. Simon's always trying to learn from people, trying to pick the brains of coaches and other athletes. And it really shows definitely a high IQ in the sport. And even in our small conversations that we've had, I've learned a lot from just how to fight even a lefty, giving both aspects. For example, like everyone's always told to circle to the outside on a lefty, foot to the outside, foot to the outside. Simon gave a completely different perspective of how you can actually put your weight in the back foot, circle to the inside, and make it work that way.
Right.
So little things like that, you don't really see that IQ in someone that's only 22, in that sense of, I guess, being a studious person. So I think that coupled with your athleticism and your background experience, you can be a world champion one day.
Thank you. You as well. We're both going to be world champion. Then this YouTube
World
channel
champs.
or whatever channel this is going to be, it's going to be fire.
It's going to be mad fire. And you guys better freaking subscribe and watch this and support, because one day you'll be seeing us on TV. You know what I'm saying?
ESPN, sign me up.
That's right. Sign up now. All right, we out.